It's not just a problem for the individual, though. This ability to change your mind or admit you are wrong, that exists within media and that exists within government as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't envy the difficult decisions that certain politicians have had to make. Whatever your feeling on politicians are, if you're responsible, if you're an elected politician, you have a constituents to represent and you have to make decisions. And public health policy is one of them. And we had a pandemic. Outside of the decisions that are made, there are tough
Plandemic.
There are tough decisions that had to be made, and some of them were clearly wrong. But you very rarely get a politician came out and say, you know what, we were totally wrong on the lockdown, or we were wrong on masks, or we were wrong. We were wrong on this. We've learned. We're moving on. Everybody seems to, not everybody, but lots of people in lots of situations, whether it's an individual, a media person, a politician, just doubles down or buries it.
Do you know what else I noticed, which was interesting? Something I didn't know was the difference between sort of the administrative state and the difference between like people who are like actual maybe scientists, right? Mm-hmm. There's two different types of state. There's political appointees, sort of like elected, if you will, by like Congress, and then there's the people that are there because they're like not just sort of administrative functionaries. They're there to do specific work. So like if you go to the CDC website, they have a whole section on air in buildings and how to solve for air problems. And the reason like the air filtration stuff worked in like tuberculosis and other pandemics that we've experienced, but like there's a whole section on the CDC website. Meanwhile, you have these administrative functionaries going out and talking about like the importance of masking and like giving the completely wrong message to the American public about like what it is that the science actually shows is really effective. And it's because it was like it was the political hot button. And that's really interesting to me that they will do that at the expense of actually saving people. They will give you the political hot button line, rather than telling you what the actual solution is. If everyone in America had bought two 24-inch by 24-inch box fans, stuck a MERV 13 filter on the back, and ran them in every room, this thing would have been like very different. But nobody did that. And that's all that you needed. It was like a $50 solution.
Is that definitely the answer?
If you had done that in every space, it would have, I mean, like, it really is the answer. Like, if you'd done that in every space, you would have had a huge reduction in transmission. Like, you have to...
A reduction, but you still would have had transmission.
Yeah, you would have had transmission. Like, you can't get rid of a pandemic.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. But the goal is to mitigate it as much as possible. And you could have mitigated it with, like, very, very cheap fixes with air filtration in rooms. And nobody did this because it never came up it was never popular politically. It's amazing.
I'd have to double check that one myself. But I agree with that. I think there are other things like protecting the vulnerable and not locking down the people who can go out and create economic growth. Some of the the weirdest rule of everything is masks on planes when you're allowed to eat and drink. It's ludicrous beyond belief that you can get on a plane and they tell you to wear your mask, but they'll serve you a drink and then you can take it off. It's just fucking ludicrous. It doesn't make any sense to anyone with even a quarter of a brain. Everyone knows that's bullshit. And that's why I think there's a lot of really tricky things with this. But like, how do you deal with it the next time?
So the airplane thing is really interesting because it actually isn't bullshit if you believe the things that rule is based on. So like, for example, you have this idea that like viral load, and I mean, I'm not an epidemiologist, but like the idea is that like the idea is that masks are going to trap, the virus. They're not going to like let it out. And if you think of like a big airplane, let's say 1% of the public has COVID at any one time. That means 1 in 100 people. The more people that you have in a space, the more it's going to trend toward the actual number of people. So like if you have a plane filled with 200 people, chances are that 2 people have it in that plane. So if you can reduce the amount of viral load that they're spewing out, you actually reduce hugely the number of people that are infected. The reason it's kind of hilarious on planes is because, again, their air filtration, they have HEPA filters. They change the air something like 6 times every 4 minutes or something. It's absurd how many times on an airplane the air is changed, sent through a HEPA filter, and it doesn't really spread. It doesn't. And so that's why that.
Like, but I'm not on about masks on a plane. I'm not about you can take your mask off when you're eating and drinking.
Yeah, but my point is that
people just do that all flight.
Yeah, well, they do that all. Yeah, they do.
Do you see the guy? There's one thing where a guy had a chip in his mouth, a McDonald's chip, and he just had it there the whole flight.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, could you fall asleep like that? I've done the thing where I've like kind of taken it off my ear, and they do come and they like wake you up, and they'll try to like get you to put the mask on. You have to do it. But the reason that makes sense is like if most people have it, the goal is always like statistical reduction of viral load in an area, and their hope is that like the person who has the virus is complying with the mask rule, and they're probably right about that, except the fact that like the mask doesn't really reduce it. The thing that saves you on an airplane is air filtration.
Okay.
Every time. Like the air filtration has been the answer, and like nobody wants to talk about it because it's not popular politically.
So let me ask you something. This conversation we're having right now, is this useful to the world? Are we doing a good thing, or are we adding to the noise? Because I'm always questioning myself. Like, what good comes of this?
Well, I think that like providing a framework, because okay, there's a lot of people out there who are very confused by what's going on, and I think everyone's kind of trying to figure out intellectually how to talk about it, and they're trying to find words. So I don't know. I mean, like I think that giving people new ways to think about it is a little bit helpful, at least. I think that everyone is very confused and trying to figure out what's going on, including you and me.
Well, we've touched lots of complicated, big subjects.
We haven't solved any of them.
And we haven't solved any of them. We're not the experts on any of them. So it's not like we can educate people really on Ukraine, Russia. We can't really educate people on COVID. We can't educate. We're not the experts, right? So what value do we add? Is the value here showing that you can have open civil debates and there should be more of this? Is it trying to encourage people to consider opinions outside themselves? Is it trying to avoid audience capture and bias? Like what are the effective things we can do in this situation?
I think for me, the thing that's been most effective, and I wish that someone had explained this early on, because like it's something that is something sort of new that I've learned, is the notion that you can find yourself being completely wrong in big ways that are considered morally reprehensible at the time, because again, we apply a moral framework to everything nowadays, and have the capability to recognize it, walk away from it, and change your thinking about, and examine why that happened. Like, I think that there needs to be a permission to being wrong. Again, it has to be permitted. Yeah. You're allowed to believe in QAnon for 2 weeks. You're allowed to do that. It's fine. You're allowed to like believe in hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin or whatever it is. And you're allowed to even have that belief for a very long time, but you should always be examining your positions, because like things change, and maybe things are not compatible. Like in the future, you'll find out like the things that you believe are not compatible with things that you previously believed.
Well, being wrong is part of free speech as well.
It's totally, it's good. Like it's okay to take positions that you're going to find out you're wrong about. I also think that it's very difficult for people to kind of like figure out where politics has entered the fray when it comes to conversation. Like where are like the Russia-Ukraine situation is perfectly good. Like why is this a left-right divide? Why is there like, why does it seem that the right is all pro-Russia and the left is all pro-Ukraine? Like, I don't understand where this bifurcation happened. And I think that people need to recognize that 2 weeks ago, they knew nothing about either subject.
What about if Trump was still in power and Russia had invaded Ukraine? I mean, I know Trump thinks it wouldn't happen, but what if? Do you think the right and say the Trump administration was openly supporting the Ukrainian administration? Do you think the right would be
pro-Ukraine?
So do you think it's an anti-Biden thing?
I don't think it's anti-Biden. I think that the framework they apply is very different for the moment, and I don't understand why who's in power is affecting the framework, because it's not explicitly anti-Biden. Like if you talk to them, they will truly tell you that they have thought it through. They've considered all of the sides, and they're like, pro-Russia. And it's strange because like, I think, for example, the anti-vaccine stuff.
Just on that point, are people that pro-Russia? Like I'm struggling to think of times where I've seen people specifically pro-Russia. I've seen
pro-Russia.
I've seen more. What I've seen is more of anti-Ukraine or suspicious of Ukraine or suspicious of agendas. Again, not pro-Russia, but also saying more kind of like the arguments are there was an agreement not to go 1 inch, east of Berlin or whatever it was, or east of Germany, whatever it was.
For NATO.
And now NATO is, and it's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Why is it in Eastern Europe? Like, I've seen those arguments. I've seen people say you've provoked them. I've seen people say, look, there's Nazis in Eastern Ukraine. I've seen all this, but I can't think of specific pro-Russia tweets or pro-Russia articles. I think it's slightly different.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. But it's weird that everyone moves in unison. Like, many of these things are the first time people have ever heard of these treaties, or they've ever heard the rhetoric of Putin. They've ever heard the rhetoric about NATO. They've ever heard about the Azov Battalion. They've ever considered the fact that, this is, it's moving in like a weird direction. It's very strange to me that everyone kind of moves in unison. And I think you're correct. I don't know that you're asserting this, but I firmly believe that if Trump were in office, these same people would be on the other side, and the left would be on the other side of this. Like, it would be the same rhetoric. And that's kind of like,
I don't know.
I think it would be. Maybe the anti-war left would be in a different, like, similarly situated. But it feels like if Trump were in office, you'd have a complete switching. And I think I think about like the vaccine rhetoric. When Trump was in office, people were ready for the vaccine. I think that if if it had been released under Trump, or like really rolled out strongly under Trump, pre the election, I think you would have had very little pushback from the right. You would have had a lot of pushback from the left. Biden takes over. Now we have like this strong contingent of people on the right who are very anti-vaccine. And everybody on the left is like, you idiots, it's good for you. You should take it every day. And it's very weird. But what's strange about it to me is that the right is stolid in their opinion now. And if Trump were reelected, let's say, they wouldn't change it. They wouldn't go back and now, like, the vaccine's okay.